Now you're welcome back. So tomorrow evening we have an Old Firm derby, Celtic against Rangers, at a very significant point in the title race as well. 23 games apiece. Rangers are 2 in front of Celtic. The latter very much deemed the team in form at the moment, and they have home advantage. Very happy to bring in Tom English of BBC Scotland. Hey Tom.
Hi Joe.
You're looking forward to a good beating at Murrayfield at the weekend. We won't get into that now though.
Scotland, you know, everyone in Ireland is talking up Scotland, Joe. It's very, very disconcerting for the Scots.
Yes. We love how they let us down continually.
Everyone over here says, why Irish rugby people hate us so much? It's a long story, lads.
I suppose last year in some respects is the greatest fourth place finish of all time, given that you won in Paris and London.
Yeah. First time win in London in 38 years. First time winning in Paris in 22 years or something like that. Blew it against Wales, Scotland. Lost by a point, having played the last 20 minutes with 14 men. And deservedly lost to Ireland. So it was close. It was off the crossbar. They're definitely getting better.
So let's turn to matters at hand. Old Firm derby midweek, which is, I was trying to rack my brains, recent memory, midweek Old Firm derby. The last one I could see was 11 years ago. At the shame game of 2011. Is that what this is? Am I right? Oh God.
Yeah, probably. I was at that game actually. Skin and hair flew after that. In hindsight, when you look back on it, everyone overreacted ridiculously. There was an Act of Parliament passed, Offensive Behaviour at Football Act, passed by the Scottish Government in response to that, which was just such heavy-handed lawmaking. It was ridiculous, and they eventually binned it. But it was in response to that game. Yeah. Gosh, I hope we don't get anything like that. That would be crazy. Either the schmozzles on the pitch, or the overzealous politicking in the aftermath.
Yeah. We might grab a picture and throw it up, but that's, from memory, that's McCoist and Lennon squaring up to each other and all that. El Hadji Diouf was knocking around then as well.
Yeah, he was a charming character, El Hadji Diouf. But it was Lennon and it was McCoist, the respective managers, throwing a few shapes and a bit of pushing and shoving. It was crazy. The reaction to it, I probably got caught up in it as well. I'd hate to go back and see my stuff, Joe, that I wrote then. I don't think I went into full shame game mode, but I was probably a bit bombastic, maybe.
It's funny you mentioned the politicking afterwards. You could fast forward almost a decade on and look at the politicking on the back of trips to Dubai around COVID time and say that politicians continue to see Scottish football as very easy feasting at times.
Well, they've been inseparable, really, in COVID times. The politics and the football authorities in this country think that the current Scottish government, the SNP, are kind of in some way anti-football. I think it's garbage, quite honestly. But there's an uneasy relationship between football in Scotland and Holyrood, the government in Holyrood in Edinburgh. But yeah, that's a whole new show, Joe. But I think your listeners would be switching off in their droves if we started to get into Scottish football versus the SNP.
Okay, point taken. So this game was originally January the 2nd, and then there was a vote to take the winter break early, and that's one of the reasons we have this midweek evening game. Is there like a pent-up demand for an evening midweek game for Old Derby clash, or makes no great odds really either way?
I think an evening game always looks better, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sounds better than the normal traditional 12 or half 12 on a Sunday. This couldn't be any more different. I'm sure the police would be concerned because it's a full house. Rangers' allocation is virtually zero. That's the way they do these things nowadays. It's between Celtic and Rangers. It's a tit for tat. They don't kind of tend to allow the other fans into their own stadiums for Old Firm games anymore. But yeah, there is a big sense of anticipation ahead of this. Lots of new players. Title on the line, 2 points between them, both faltering. Neither of them have looked that convincing. Celtic probably have more momentum, but they're still not 100% convincing, although they haven't had their best team on the pitch yet. but they're probably in a marginally better place at the moment. And, you know, underpinning all of this is that the probability that whoever wins the league this season is going to go straight into the group stage of the Champions League. That's the way the coefficient, the seedings are working at the moment. So that's like 30 million plus straight into the bank balance, you know, so it's big stuff.
Remind us of the genesis of this tit for tat with away fans at Old Firm games.
I think it goes back to fans. I don't know who started it, to be honest. I can't remember. But they cut the allocation down because their own fans were going, well, why are we giving this club 4, 5, 6, 7,000 tickets when, you know, there's demand for all those tickets for your own season ticket holders and your own people. So I think the allocation was reduced, and then it was reduced again, and then COVID came along and it changed it again. And it's not looking like Rangers or Celtic are going to turn back the clock on this, because I think the respective fans don't really want them to turn back the clock. If it's 60,000 tomorrow night, which it will be, Celtic fans, a lot of Celtic fans would say, yeah, you know, it'd be nice if there was 6,000 or 7,000 Rangers fans in there, but that means 6,000 or 7,000 of our own people are not getting in. And the feeling is mutual at Ibrox. So I think they're a bit of an impasse there.
Right. Because the neutral in me would say it's a much better atmosphere to have the 6,000 or 7,000 away fans in. Yes and no. Depends on what the atmosphere is like. Sometimes the atmosphere can be poisonous. Sometimes it can be poisonous. And you think, you know, okay, people kind of talk about the Old Firm derby and the atmosphere and all this. Well, if they're singing some of the songs, some of the stuff that they're singing, then you can kind of do without it, or at least I can. But it does take away, there's no question, it does take away from the kind of gladiatorial aspect to the Old Firm, which made it a pretty special derby in the first place. We're not allowed to call it the Old Firm anymore, Joe, by the way. That's gone. Celtic fans get up in arms when you call it the Old Firm nowadays. Sorry, I didn't realise.
It's called the Glasgow derby now.
Okay.
Or at least that's what Celtic fans, a lot of Celtic fans, not all of them. It's a bit, again, excuse me, it's a bit of the pantomime of the rivalry between Celtic and Rangers.
Explain that to me. So since I've been a young football fan, I've called it the Old Firm derby without ever even questioning what the Old Firm means. It's just what I call it. So why is that now offensive?
Well, some Celtic fans will say, and I don't want to get myself into trouble here, but they will say that in 2012, when Rangers went bust, and you're talking about administration there and liquidation, they would argue that this Rangers is not the same as...
for God's sake. Okay, well, I'm calling it the Old Firm.
There you go.
Jeez, come on.
I call it the Old Firm as well.
So I thought there was a more genuine reason than that nonsense. Right,
Well, you know, watch your timeline, Joe. Watch your timeline.
It's fine. Look, my favourite button in the world is the mute button, Tom. You know?
Yeah, join the club. Try block. I've become an indiscriminate blocker these days on Twitter.
Like, I take the point about what happened at Rangers, but they still play at Ibrox. It's still the same fan base. I don't think it's a good enough reason to throw out calling it the Old Firm derby, which is, you know, has global appeal. Like, let's not shoot yourself in the foot either. I
think there's an element of some Celtic fans winding up the Rangers fans by doing this. Some would absolutely believe it. Others would just go along with it because they know it gets under their skin.
Okay. So
that's all the fun of the fair.
Let's talk about the two respective managers then. Ange Postecoglou has come in. Initially, there were raised eyebrows on who is this guy, and Celtic lost 3 of their first league games this season, but subsequently have won 14 of 17, 3 draws in there as well. And genuinely reading various observers, from Kenny Dalglish to others who are, you know, on the ground week to week, people are very impressed with the job Postecoglou has done. His recruitment, it seems, has been top class. So give us your view on Ange Postecoglou this season. Really,
really, really good. Really refreshing. Very honest, very straight talking. You know, since the disaster of last season for Celtic, it's a total rebuild. It's probably the biggest rebuild of a team at Celtic since since I don't know, since the war, maybe. I mean, Martin O'Neill, when he came in, had a big rebuild. This is a much bigger rebuild than Martin O'Neill's rebuild. There's a couple of the team that's going to start. Well, say the Celtic's best team right now, what I consider to be best team right now, there's probably only 2 guys in that team that were there last season. So it's a total rebuild. He has an energy about him. He signed extremely well by the looks of it. Not just in terms of the quality of player he's brought in, but he's got them for relative buttons. The team is playing well. They've won a cup already. They've won the first cup of the season, the League Cup. They've closed the gap on Rangers. And I think everyone all the Celtic fans just like the look of Postecoglou, the way he wants his team to play. The fact he's a bit different. He's done very, very well. Breath of fresh air, really.
Anytime I see him speak, he has a natural authority, I would say. So when you say a bit different, you might expand on that for us.
Well, he speaks extremely well, and he will answer a question directly. He just won't give you a kind of a stock answer. But you want to be, as a journalist, you want to be on your game, because he will throw it back at you, saying, mate, that's a bit of a stupid question. He'll give it to you, and that's great. I think that's brilliant. He asked a stupid question, then fine. And I think just the way he talks about the game, the way he brought in Kyogo Furuhashi, they spent proper money on him, close to 4 million. But he's been amazing. He's been extraordinary for Celtic. He's injured. Unfortunately, he won't be playing tomorrow night. In January, he brought in 3 more Japanese players, so he's tapping into that market. And all 3 of them look really good. It's early days, but the 3 of them look very, very good. And it's just the way he kind of thinks differently. It would have been easy, for example, when Eddie Howe was linked, and they had for month upon month, they pursued Eddie Howe as the successor to Neil Lennon in the summer. And the rumours coming through about the type of player that Eddie Howe looking at was just guys from lower reaches of the Premier League in England. Familiar guys, good solid players. Postecoglu comes in and he immediately signs Kyogo Furuhashi from Japan. He signs Liel Abada, who's been very good, 20-year-old right winger, very, very good. He signs Jota on loan from Portugal. Excellent. Just different. He's throwing different thinking at it. Mm-hmm. And it's working. I mean, the guy, as far as Celtic fans are concerned, the guy walks on water. And he's very open. He talks about his father a lot. That does help. His father, he idolises his father, and he's opened up in that kind of personal way. He's kind of let the fans into his world, what it was like for him growing up, the principles that his father instilled in him. And yeah, I mean, he's been very, very, very open and very impressive.
Yeah. Tell us more about his father then. What does he say about him?
Well, his love of football came from his father. The way the game should be played came from his father. He seems to do everything. Listen, I don't want to be a pop psychologist here, but he obviously had a huge love for his father, and excuse me, huge love for his father. And learned so much from him, and spoken quite emotionally about his dad. So that plays very well. His father was obviously a big football fan and knew a lot about the game, and he brought up his son to play in a certain way. And he talks about the values, not just football values, but values as a person that were bred into him. And Celtic fans love all that. I mean, all football fans love that kind of honesty and his willingness to invite people into his world, not just his football world, but his life.
And so how does Postecoglou see the game, and how does he think it should be played? Attacking
high-intensity football. He said it before. They train the way they play. And there is, in the initial stages, there is a kind of kind of an attritional count in terms of injuries, and there has been. They've had an awful run of injuries, in part probably because of bad luck, in part because he's demanding. He keeps saying this, I demand an awful lot of my players. So I think he does. His training is very, very intense. He wants his team to play incredibly high tempo, high press, aggressive, and then when they get the ball, play. Wingers, and he's brought in, with Furuhashi, he picks just wonderful lines that he runs, brilliant finisher, the two wide boys, Jota on the left, Abada on the right, very creative players, very dynamic players, very quick, just likes to play it quick. And that's kind of, again, you go back to what Celtic fans would call the Celtic way, the way Jock Stein used to set up his team back in the day. It's the kind of Celtic way. They would try and win with a bit of style. Not just 1-0, grind it out. Try and be a bit more, try and aspire to way more than that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Postecoglou is trying to do.
Further to your point on Abada, he scored the winner at the weekend against Dundee, a late winner in a 1-0 win, whereas Rangers drew 3-0 at Ross County to open the door here for Celtic to overtake Rangers, which is what makes tomorrow so enticing, I think, for lots of people who are going to tune in midweek game. It's going to have a really big audience, this game, I would think. You mentioned all those signings, Jota and Abada and the others who've hit the ground running. By Scottish terms, has Postecoglou spent a huge amount of money here, or has he done this on a pretty good budget?
He's done it on a good budget. I mean, they've spent, he's got the three Japanese lads that came in January. Hatate looks a lovely footballer.
He's in midfield.
The left. Yeah, well, they've been playing him left side in midfield.
Okay.
He can play left back. He can play left wing back. He's a versatile player. He can come into the middle. Looks like he can play. He's just a lovely footballer. One of those guys you can feel he can play anywhere. Ideguchi is more defensive midfielder. And Maeda, who's with Japan at the moment and who they're hoping will be back in time for the game tomorrow night to play some part, he's a centre forward. Now, or he can play wide as well of the three. He likes to play 4-3-3, Postecoglu. So those three guys, those four Japanese guys now have kind of lit the place up. And it's very interesting, he's got them he spent proper money on Furuhashi, knocking on for 4 million. He spent less than $1 million on Ideguchi. He spent Hatate is about 1.4, and Maeda is probably a bit less than that. So you're never quite sure what the numbers involved, but cheap. In fact, one of the Japanese journalists said at the time that it's fair play to Celtic. They've taken these three players, but they're guilty of daylight robbery. Because two of them were in the team of the year in Japan last season. Maeda and Hatate were in the team of the year. So he's resourced that market. He hasn't spent a lot of money. I mean, Celtic sold Christopher Ayer to Brentford. They sold Edward to Crystal Palace. And they sold one other player for proper money whose name escapes me now. But all of those have funded more or less everything that Postecoglou has spent. So he's done really good business, particularly since Celtic for the last couple of seasons in the transfer market have been a bomb scare. They've been terrible. Panic buys, panic loan buys, a very high failure rate. Postecoglou's come in, and most of the guys he's brought in, the big ticket items, have been a big success.
Okay, very interesting. So Stephen Gerrard's bedding in very well at Aston Villa. How is Giovanni van Bronckhorst bedding in at Rangers?
Started off very well. He inherited a team, obviously, that were the champions, but had kind of fallen away a little bit, even though they were still on top of the league. The performance levels weren't of a very high order. Defence suddenly had looked vulnerable. So he came in, and in his early games, he fixed that. Defence immediately looked solid. Gerrard liked to play with his two fullbacks, very, very attacking. Barisic on the left and Tavernier on the right. or Nathan Patterson, also on the right, who's obviously now at Everton. They always used to bomb along, and they used to score goals, and particularly Tavernier, and create an awful lot. Van Bronckhorst has been a little bit more circumspect in terms of his fullbacks, get them to drop a bit deeper, defend more often. And that was working. Lately, they've looked flaky at the back again, particularly against Ross County at the weekend. Alan McGregor, who's now 40 years of age, an absolute veteran, has been a brilliant, brilliant player for them and was exceptional in goal last season, started to make a few mistakes. Conor Golston has made a few mistakes. Glenn Kamara has made a few mistakes. So it's the spine of the team. It's the goalkeeper, the centre half, and the defensive midfielder are making the kind of mistakes that they didn't make last season at all, really, domestically, or at least in the league. So they look, even though they're still 2 points in the lead, they're not what they were last season. And people will say, well, you can't be, because they were unbeaten throughout the league season last season, and fair play. But certainly Celtic have moved up considerably, but I would say Rangers have moved back a tad as well to narrow that gap.
One signing which caught the eye obviously yesterday was Aaron Ramsey at 31 years of age, still very good age, on a 6-month loan deal to Rangers. He hasn't played in Serie A since October, so I would think with a view to the World Cup, amongst other things, he wants first team football. He said, I had a number of offers on the table. None matched the magnitude of this club, European football, the chance to play in front of 50,000 fans every other week. I'm not sure who's paying his wages or what's going on there, but he's certainly a high-profile signing, the kind that you wouldn't associate with Scottish football of late, I would think.
No, he's certainly probably the most high-profile in terms of kind of players of that stature coming into Scottish football. You go back to Roy Keane and Robbie Keane coming in, that type.
Yeah.
Massive, huge. There was rumours last season, Joe, that Rangers were interested in him. And kind of people dismissed it as, paper talk, tabloids getting excited. But clearly there was something in it, because they've done the deal now. Rangers say they haven't broken their wage structure. So Juventus are picking up the vast majority of his salary on this. I don't know what Rangers are paying. I would imagine that their top whack weekly salary would be in the region of 30-ish. So he's probably on something of that order. From them, Juventus will be paying the rest. But it's a signing that has absolutely thrilled the Rangers fans, as you can imagine. He won't be playing tomorrow night. He's not ready. But he's the type that they need. That creative midfielder, goal scorer, creator, glamorous. And you could say, it's short-termism till the end of the season. But you go back to that probable automatic spot in the Champions League. And both of these teams will do whatever they can to win the league and claim that spot. Not just for the money, but obviously for the glamour of group stage Champions League football. And it's been a while since Rangers or Celtic have had one of those. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what Ramsey does.
Yeah, for sure. Just a kind of top of the head question, the Scottish League and its place within Scottish football and the public's general interest in it, I'm wondering, is that diluted for the younger generation who are hitting their teens and 20s now? Because there was obviously a time going way back when to, those Leeds Rangers games in the Battle of Britain, and even into Martin O'Neill's time at Celtic when they're making serious forays into Europe and winning at the San Siro, where, the quality was very, very, very respectable. And increasingly over time, money is what it is. I mean, you're talking about 4 million quid as, serious cash for a player. I mean, in the Premier League, that'd be laughable by comparison. So the comparative drop in quality is one thing. And also demographics have shifted in that right around the world, not least here, I think a lot of kids, they don't necessarily support a team, they support Messi. and they've gone from wearing Barcelona jerseys to PSG jerseys, and they support Ronaldo, and they'll follow him around. That's been an aspect of how fans support teams. So I wonder if all of those various things have come together to make Scottish football less engrossing for the younger generation. Are they leaning more towards Premier League? Are they leaning more towards the superstars? Do you see more of those jerseys around Glasgow or beyond, or is Scottish football still very much the main attraction for the younger fans?
Look, I mean, you'll see Barcelona jerseys, and you'll see, some of the English jerseys knocking about the place, but largely you'll see Scottish football jerseys. It's very robust, Joe, Scottish football. I mean, say what you like about it, and it is intoxicating. And I speak obviously as an Irishman, it does get under your skin. There's something about it. I think it matters so much, whether you're talking to a Rangers fan or a Celtic fan or a Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, Dundee United, whoever, St Johnstone, it doesn't matter. The passion that they have for their club is incredible. It's like a local GAA, parish stuff.
Yeah.
That's what it's like. And the fans, they are so loyal, and most of them can never even hope to see their team winning a trophy. It's going to be Celtic and Rangers most of the time, or at least Celtic. It has been Celtic monopolising the trophies until last season. But when that little bit of magic happens, St Johnstone win the League Cup and the Scottish Cup last season. Incredible. And I think there is, and I don't want to get too pious about this, but I think there is an honesty about Scottish football. The fact that it isn't awash with money. The fact that all those clubs have to work their sides off in their communities to get the fans through the gates, and all of them work incredibly hard. Nothing comes easy for these clubs because they're on the breadline, a lot of them. And they work really, really hard. And I think that gives it an integrity. I mean, I spent 3 hours with Partick Thistle's manager a couple of weeks ago, Ian McCall, and to see the work that he does and his small team around him do, not just in the football club, but in the community, is incredible. And that's replicated all over the place. Really good people working hard. It's the only thing I can compare it to is GAA clubs, hurling and football clubs up and down Ireland. And they are as important, the football teams in Scotland are as important as those hurling and football teams are in Ireland in parish life. And that endures. It survived. Everyone, when COVID came and there's no money in Scottish football, relatively speaking, and the governance of the game could be a whole lot better from the top. But when COVID came, there was an awful lot of talk about Armageddon. This could kill off a lot of these small clubs, these community clubs, because they need punters through the gates and they weren't getting them and football was suspended. They all endured. They all did what they had to do. And the communities helped them. The communities, they said, well, I know I've paid for my season ticket and I know there's no football to watch, but it's fine. Keep the money. You don't have to reimburse me. And what can we do to help out? Is there anything we can do to come and help the club? I mean, great stories. Really, really heartwarming stories. Maybe you get that down in the Premier League in England, but, certainly you get it here.
That's really interesting. Oh God, in some ways the picture you painted there is the perfect blend, because here in Ireland with the League of Ireland clubs, it's not under people's skin. GAA is very much about your sense of place, and that indoctrination almost that you're talking about, which gives the Scottish League the robustness, that's not there with League of Ireland clubs around the country. There aren't enough clubs. There's too many in Dublin. There's not enough in other counties around the country. So we're not quite there, nor is it successful enough to be in the Champions League too often, realistically. And then at the other end of the spectrum, the Premier League is now this corporate, hollow, sanitised monster, which feels further and further adrift from people in the streets. So actually, God, when you paint it that way, maybe you have the perfect blend, actually, of quality and infrastructure with a realness.
There's a realness. And, the owners, the chief executives, they're visible here. Most of them. Not all of them, but most of them. A lot of them are on Twitter. A lot of them engage with their fans all the time. And I think that's an awful lot to be commended on that. I think Scottish football, it can be a bit of a punch bag if people can be bothered throwing a punch. But there's an awful lot of good in it. I am definitely a champion of it. I know it's false. It's many, many faults. And whenever the notion of Celtic and Rangers moving down to England is drummed up, and it's always rubbish, really. There's never anything in it. I always think, right, okay, what's going to happen? Say Celtic and Rangers go and join the Premier League or work their way up from lower leagues into the Premier League. They're both massive, massive institutions. So foreign owners, absolutely ripe for the picking, Celtic and Rangers, ripe for the picking. Immediately, the fabric of those clubs changes. It just changes, like Man United has changed, like Man City has changed. And maybe a lot of people would say for the better, a lot of people would say for the worse. I would hate to see Celtic and Rangers leave. And I know both of them at various times would say, we need to leave to progress. I understand that. I get that. But I think the fabric of those, be careful what you wish for, would be my point. I think they could end up with a club that they don't recognise anymore.
Yes, the Saudi PIF could swoop in, and then you have all sorts of issues. Listen, that was fascinating. So, Old Firm Derby. Sorry, I'm not trolling anyone by saying that. It's just the Old Firm Derby to me, and that's the way it is. Old Firm Derby tomorrow.
You said it, Joe.
Glasgow Derby, whatever. Celtic against Rangers. God, can I say anything? Tom English of BBC Scotland. Thanks so much, Tom. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Joe.